Have you ever stopped to think about what happens to your body and soul after death? What if I told you that your tattoos have a meaning beyond what you imagine? Listen to this fascinating story. I always saw my tattoos as simple ink on the skin, but somehow they told my story. Some good, others not so much, but all had meaning. My first tattoo was an act of rebellion, a way to show that I was in control of my life. It was a simple, small design on my arm. After that, I got addicted, and my body became a canvas. Each tattoo represented something. Strength after a breakup, a tribute to someone who passed away, symbols of wisdom and balance, and some just because they were beautiful. I never thought much about their weight. To me, they were just art. My life was always like that, without many rules. I grew up in a religious environment. My mother took me to church, but I never connected with it. Heaven, hell, salvation. It all seemed like a means of control. I had my own beliefs, my own truth, and in it God was just a detail. I didn't consider myself a bad person. I worked hard, took care of my own, avoided trouble most of the time. I wasn't perfect, but who was? My tattoos, just like the life I chose, were just part of me. Until that night, which should have been ordinary. I went out with friends, had some drinks, laughed about the craziness of youth. I was fine, relaxed, enjoying myself. Until suddenly, a crushing pain in my chest, like a blade piercing my heart, and the world spun. My knee buckled. I remember grabbing my chest, trying to breathe. My friends' voices became distant. Someone shouted my name. Then, silence. And then, a strange sensation. As if I were being pulled out of my body. I saw my friends running, saw my body falling to the ground, but I was no longer there. It was as if I had been sucked into another place. At first, just darkness. I thought it was a dream, a hallucination. But it wasn't. It was real. I tried to move, but I had no body. I still thought, still felt, but it was different. And then, the darkness began to move. At first it felt like water around me. No pressure, no sound, but soon I realized. It was alive, pulsing, distorting, as if something was in it. That's when I felt the presence. It wasn't warm, nor comforting, just observing. First, like a distant whisper, then stronger. I wasn't alone. The cold spread through me, from the inside out. I was never afraid of the unknown. Always prided myself on facing anything. But this was different. Something was coming. I turned, or tried to. Still without a body, but I could feel the movement. And then shadows. Not just darkness, figures in the darkness. They moved, watching me. And then, they advanced. I tried to scream, run, anything. But I was trapped. Without a mouth. Without a voice. Without an escape. And as they approached, an absolute terror overtook me. I knew. Deep down, I knew they were waiting for me. They knew me, and they weren't there to help me. It was then that I heard the voice. Not theirs, not mine. From somewhere you are marked. The words hit like thunder. I didn't understand. Then, the presence grew stronger. I knew they weren't talking about the scars on my skin. It was something else, something invisible, but real. My tattoos had meaning, and I was about to discover what they really represented. That's when a light broke through the darkness. A blinding, pure, powerful light. The shadows screamed and retreated. I felt something greater than anything I had ever known. Warm, relentless. The darkness didn't just retreat, it fled, and suddenly, I was no longer in that void. I was in another place, in a sacred space. Before me, shining beyond what my mind could comprehend, was Jesus Christ. I floated above my own body, watching the chaos unfold below. The paramedics moved quickly. Voices shouted numbers and medical terms. My chest rose and fell strangely as they tried to bring me back. I should have been panicking, but I only felt a strange detachment. As if watching a movie that had nothing to do with me. I saw my pale, lifeless face, my mouth slightly open. My tattooed arm carrying symbols whose meanings I had long forgotten. Nothing seemed real. I tried to speak, move, touch someone, say I was still there. But I couldn't. No voice, no body, just a spectator trapped between spaces. Then something changed. An invisible force, impossible to resist, took hold of me. At first, a subtle pull. Then, a strong current dragging me. I fought, but there was no ground to hold on to. I was being pulled away from the hospital, from my body, from everything I knew. The emergency room distorted. The voices disappeared, and everything collapsed into darkness. Panic took over. I tried to break free, but it was useless. I wasn't falling. I was being taken. The darkness around wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, dense, suffocating. Then, I heard the whispers. First faint, then loud, overlapping guttural voices, sharp, mocking, speaking to me. Figures formed in the darkness. I didn't see faces, just cold, empty, hungry eyes. They were waiting. One of them approached, and terror seized me. Long, twisted fingers, bending at wrong angles, the voice cut through my mind. "You are marked," and then, a memory came like a lightning bolt. My tattoos. Could it be that? My heart raced. Invisible chains held me, restrained me. I was never superstitious. Always laughed at those who talked about spirits and demons. But there, at that moment, there was no denying it. I was in their world now. The whispers turned into screams. The shadows multiplied, advancing. I struggled, tried to flee, but their strength was too much. My mind screamed in terror. Was this hell? Was this where my life led me? When the first hand almost touched me, the light returned. Not just any light, it was authority. A force so pure that the darkness didn't just retreat, it was destroyed. The whispers turned into screams of agony. The figures dissipated, pushed into the void. The chains around me shattered, as if they had never existed. The shadows lost control. The force pulling me down no longer had dominion, and in the center of the light I heard. At first, it was impossible to comprehend. The brightness wasn't just light, it was life, it was power. Justice and mercy at the same time. Everything I had spent my life ignoring, everything I had dismissed, was now before me. The shadows screamed, retreated, disappearing into the void. The same figures that were about to claim me were nothing before him. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Nor did I want to, because at that moment I knew exactly who he was. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly powerless before something greater than myself. Jesus Christ. The light consumed every shadow, every trace of darkness that tried to take me. I was there, if staying was the right word, but it wasn't just the brightness that left me breathless. It was the presence, a power so immense that made every part of me tremble. It was like being at the center of the force that sustained the universe. And then, through the splendor, I heard, not as a distant figure. He wasn't just a man standing before me, he was everything. The very definition of truth. His eyes, I will never forget. They didn't just look at me, they saw through me. Every thought, every sin, every moment of my life, nothing was hidden. I was exposed for the first time, without excuses, without distractions, without clever justifications. I spent years convincing myself that I was a good person, that my life was mine to live as I wished, but there before him, there was no escaping the truth, and the truth was that I was blind. A crushing shame fell over me. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I had no control over my body. I wanted to speak, say anything, but the words wouldn't come, and yet, in the midst of all this, I felt something I had never truly known, not human love, which fades and gives up. It was a love that didn't ignore my sins, saw them exactly as they were, and yet, Jesus remained there. Unwavering, the weight of my own failures crushed me. I wanted to explain, justify, say I didn't understand, that I thought faith was just tradition, but he didn't need to hear anything. He already knew. And then, before I could form a single word, he raised his hand. Everything changed. The brightness dissipated enough for me to see something else. It wasn't a dream, nor a memory. It was like I was there. I saw, heard, felt. A vast desert stretched before me. Ancient people moved, their bodies marked by intricate symbols, sacred patterns, carved with precision. They weren't merely decorations. I could feel the power in those marks. Some radiated light, an invisible force. Others were dark, pulsed with something sinister. They weren't just physical, they were spiritual. I saw men kneeling before a high priest. He murmured prayers, and as he did so, the symbols appeared on their skin. But it wasn't ink, it was something more, something binding, and then I saw the spiritual world reacting. Some of these men were sealed, protected by the divine, but others, when the mark touched their skin, something in the darkness awoke. Dark entities appeared, attaching themselves to those symbols. The men shuddered as if an invisible weight fell upon them, but they didn't know what they had just done. And it was at that moment that I understood. This always happened from the beginning. Tattoos were never just art, never just expression. They were a language, a seal, a silent declaration of belonging. The vision changed again. Another time, another place. Warriors prepared for war, marking their bodies with war symbols. They prayed to the gods, unaware of what they were truly invoking. I saw priests, sorcerers, and rulers throughout history, their bodies marked by symbols that connected them to something beyond comprehension. Some were divine seals, others, something horrifying. The marks didn't belong only to the living. I saw bodies being buried with sacred inscriptions, seals that guaranteed a specific destiny in the afterlife. I saw entire cultures being marked unknowingly, connected to ancient pacts they never consented to. And then the vision changed. I was no longer in the past. Now I saw the present, illuminated cities, bustling streets, people living their lives unaware, and tattoos were everywhere. But there was a difference. No one thought about their meaning anymore. They were just aesthetics, fashion, trend, and a man tattooing a snake on his arm without realizing that the exact moment the needle touched his skin, something moved in the darkness. A shadow approached, subtle, almost imperceptible. It wasn't a horror movie possession, but an influence, a whisper that rooted in him without resistance. I saw a woman tattooing on her back, laughing with un tattoo on her back, laughing with friends while admiring the design in the mirror. But she didn't see what I saw. The instant the line was completed, something attached to her, a spirit watching, waiting. Now they were connected in a way she would never understand. And then my stomach turned. People were being marked unknowingly. Ignorance was the worst part. They had no idea they had opened doors, that they had allowed something to enter. And that's exactly how the enemy wanted it. He didn't need to invade, take by force. He just needed people to do it willingly. I saw spirits feeding on this deception. They didn't attack, just waited to be invited. Not all marks were bad. Some were neutral, and some were sacred seals, marks of protection and dedication to God. But these were disappearing. The world had distorted tattoos, trivialized them, stripped them of their meaning. But the meaning never left them. They just made the world believe it didn't matter anymore. The enemy didn't win by force. He won by illusion. My heart raced as I saw people walking unaware of the weight they carried. Their bodies were covered in symbols, some harmless, others devastating. Some had linked them to forces they didn't even believe in. But then I saw something even worse. The tattoos were changing. They were no longer a personal choice. The world was moving towards a time when markings would be universal. A global system. The time would come when they wouldn't just be an expression, but a necessity, a mandatory seal. My spirit trembled. I choked. I knew what that meant. And then the vision ended. Suddenly I was back, before Jesus, my entire being shaken to the core. I looked at him without words. And he simply said, "Now you understand." I was frozen, my mind spinning, trying to process what I had just witnessed. His words echoed inside me, not as sound, but as something deeper, undeniable. I spent my life thinking tattoos were just art, a way to tell my story. Now I saw what they really were. Declarations, spiritual contracts in the invisible world. I had never considered that, never thought my ink covered that. Body could mean something beyond what I intended, but now there was no denying it. Jesus raised his hand once more. Another vision began to unfold. I saw people of all ages and backgrounds, young, old, rich, poor, all marked. Some marks glowed faintly, seals of protection, almost forgotten. Others pulsed with something much darker, and then I saw the battle each faced. The marks they carried weren't just drawings on the skin, they were invisible burdens: addiction, depression, anxiety. I saw a young man sitting in his apartment, head and hands trembling from withdrawal. His arms were covered in tattoos, symbols of death, destruction, rebellion. To him they were harmless, just part of his identity. But as I watched, I saw shadows clinging to him, feeding on his pain, his vulnerability. A woman cried alone in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Another failed relationship, another piece of her breaking. Her tattoos told a story of self-overcoming, of love and passion. Beneath the lines, there was something more. A spiritual weight, an invisible connection she wasn't even aware of. She thought she was unlucky in love, but in reality, something whispered lies in her mind for years, convincing her she wasn't worthy of something pure. I turned, saw more and more people connected to forces they should never have been part of. I saw the moment the ink touched the skin, and something in the spiritual realm moved. Some of these tattoos weren't chosen freely. They were influenced. A whisper, an inexplicable attraction to a certain design, certain symbol. People thought they were choosing something cool, unique. But in reality, that idea had been planted long before. Jesus spoke, and his voice carried a weight that gave me chills. Not all marks are evil, but many carry more than you can understand. I turned and saw a man kneeling in prayer, his arms also covered in tattoos. But these were different. They glowed faintly, carried something sacred. Around him, angels watched. His marks weren't chains, they were weapons. Jesus watched, continued. The enemy doesn't create, he only distorts. What was sacred, he corrupted. I saw how it all happened. The markings, once symbols of divine alliance and protection, had their meaning altered. The world was convinced that tattoos were just ink, without spiritual value. And in this ignorance, the enemy had free reign. Then Jesus revealed something that made me shudder. Some tattoos weren't just personal, they were invitations. I saw people tattooing symbols of ancient deities, believing they were honoring history or embracing a culture. The moment the ink touched the skin, something claimed them. I saw people marking sigils, hidden symbols, thinking it was just aesthetics. Without realizing, they had just entered into an agreement with something invisible. They didn't need to sign a contract. The tattoo was the contract. I saw a man laughing with friends while choosing a demonic design to cover his arm. When the artist finished, something changed. He blinked, shook his head, as if a strange thought had passed through his mind. He dismissed it, moved on. But I saw what he couldn't see. Something settled over him, subtle, patient. Some expressed themselves unknowingly, others knew exactly what they were doing. I saw musicians, celebrities, influencers tattooing symbols of deep meanings, sharing them with millions of followers. People copying, marking themselves without questioning what they were really carrying. And then, I saw something even worse. The tattoos weren't just connecting people to spirits, they were preparing them for something. I turned to Jesus, and my voice came out trembling. What is this leading to? He looked at me with sadness in his eyes, the final mark, and suddenly I understood. The world was being conditioned. People were being prepared. The markings were being normalized, stripped of their spiritual meaning, so that when the true mark came, no one would question. My heart raced. The weight of the truth fell on me like an avalanche. The tattoos were just the beginning. The world was being led to something much darker, and most people would never see it coming. Before me, there was no chaos, no confusion, just perfect order, unshakable balance. Jesus was by my side, his presence firm, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding. Two groups of people. On one side, those who bore a mark. It wasn't a tattoo, nor ink, but something much deeper. A divine seal. It wasn't something they chose from a catalog of designs, or asked an artist for. It was given to them. The mark glowed faintly, embedded in their very essence. A sign of protection. A belonging to something greater than themselves. These people were different, not physically, but in their presence, there was peace in their eyes, a certainty that couldn't be shaken. They stood firm and unyielding, as if no force on earth could destroy them. They had no fear. Then I turned to the other group and immediately felt the difference. Something was wrong. The air around them was heavy, dense as if an invisible force oppressed them. They also bore a mark, but this one was dark, distorted. While the first radiated protection, this one imprisoned them. Their eyes told the story before I could even process everything. They were trapped. Some flaunted arrogance, a blind pride, believing they had made the right choice. They didn't even realize they were slaves. Others, however, knew. I saw in their faces the regret, the terror. They desperately tried to remove the desperate mark, scratch their own skin. But it was useless. It wouldn't come off. It was permanent. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely a whisper. "What are they seeing?" He spoke with an authority that shook me deeply. "The choice that will divide the world." I turned my gaze back to the vision, and suddenly, everything made sense. It wasn't about tattoos, nor self-expression. It was about loyalty. The enemy spent centuries preparing for this moment, desensitizing the world, normalizing the markings, making them fashion, identity, all so that when the final mark came, no one would question. I saw people before this choice. Some accepted the enemy's mark without hesitation, embraced it as if it were the key to a better life, a symbol of progress and power, displayed it with pride, without realizing what they had just done. But others hesitated. Some felt a deep discomfort in their souls, a silent warning somehow. They knew it was wrong, intuited that accepting that mark meant losing something precious. Refusal had a price. I saw those who refused being persecuted, were expelled, deprived of rights, treated as extremists, enemies of progress. Some were hunted, others executed, but they stood firm. The seal of God was on them. Their faith didn't waver. Their eyes reflected the truth amidst the lie. My soul trembled. The weight of what I was seeing crushed me. Then Jesus turned his gaze to me and said, "There will come a time when every person will have to choose." I swallowed hard. "And most will choose wrong." Jesus nodded. And there was sadness in his eyes, because they have already been conditioned. I lowered my eyes to my own arms. For the first time, I felt the weight of the tattoos covering my skin. Not just physically, but spiritually. Everything had meaning. Everything had meaning. Mark carried something beyond what the eyes could see. Some were marks of identity, others of slavery. The enemy spent centuries ensuring no one knew the difference. I turned to Jesus filled with despair. How do I warn them? His gaze pierced me, more than anything I have ever felt before. You must tell them the truth before it's too late. A sudden force pulled me back. I felt my body being dragged away from the vision, away from Jesus. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to go. I wasn't ready to leave. But my time was up. As I was pulled back, I saw the last thing, the moment of the final choice. The instant the world would decide. Would they accept the mark of deception or the seal of God? And I knew most would choose wrong. The weight of the truth fell on me like a crushing force. The world was blindly walking without knowing they were stepping into a trap, prepared for centuries. And Jesus showed me the truth before it was too late. His voice, calm, but full of authority, echoed within me. They have been deceived. And then a new vision began to unfold before me. A world as it is now. I saw people sitting in tattoo parlors, flipping through catalogs, choosing through images that seemed appealing without ever questioning their meanings. Some pointed to ancient symbols, forgotten by time, but still carrying weight in the spiritual world. Others marked their bodies with words and phrases that were once used in dark rituals, unaware of the origin. None of them imagined, but I saw what they couldn't. The moment the needle touched the skin, something changed. The spiritual realm reacted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like an invisible thread connecting them to something beyond this world. A silent bond, tying them without them realizing. Then Jesus showed me something even worse. Technology advanced. The marks were no longer just ink. Now they were digital biometrics embedded under the skin. At first, they seemed like an option, an advancement. A symbol of progress, medical records, identification, access to services, all linked to a single mark. At first it was a choice, then no more. I saw people being barred from stores, banks, hospitals. If they didn't have the mark, they couldn't enter. Governments ensured it was necessary, claiming safety, practicality, unity. Celebrities, influencers, public figures displayed it with pride, said it was the future, and children were born into a world where it was already normal. Even churches accepted it. Pastors stood in pulpits saying there was nothing wrong, that it was just part of modernity. But I saw, the moment people received this mark, something claimed them. It wasn't immediate. There were no screams or fainting, but a door closed, a bond was cut. God still spoke, but they could no longer hear. I turned to Jesus, my voice trembling. Is this the final mark? His eyes laden with sadness met mine. This is just the preparation. A shiver ran through my body. If this was just a rehearsal, what would the real thing be? The vision changed again, and I saw something even worse, a time of chaos, the collapse of the economy, people desperate, hungry for order, peace, hope. Then a leader emerged. A system was implemented. The mark became mandatory. I saw people accepting without question. Some believed it was the only way out. Others refused. And I saw what happened to them. They were cut off from everything. Without food, without shelter, without access to society. I saw parents facing the despair of choosing between feeding their children or keeping their faith. Some gave in. Others refused to the end. Looked to the sky and resisted. Jesus turned to me. The time will come when everyone will have to choose. I swallowed hard, and most will choose wrong, he nodded, because they have already been conditioned. This was always the plan, to make marks something common, normalize them, turn them into trends, into self-expression, remove their spiritual meaning. And when the true mark came, no one would question. My heart tightened. How had I not seen this before? How did the world not see it now? I turned to Jesus desperate. But they won't believe me. His gaze pierced my soul. Some will believe. The vision began to fade, but his words remained engraved in me. The time is coming. The choice will be made, and many will be lost because they never knew they were choosing. Everything went dark. Suddenly, I found myself back before Jesus, my mind still trying to process everything I had seen, the deception, the conditioning, the choice that was to come. It was so clear now. The world was heading towards something irreversible, and most wouldn't realize until it was too late. I tried to speak, plead for more time, for more answers. But before I could form the words, I felt the force of a pull. This time it was different. It wasn't like before, when I was dragged into darkness. This was stronger, absolute. I looked at Jesus. Your time has not yet come. The words sounded like a definitive command. I wanted to stay, learn more, understand everything before returning, but I had no choice. The decision was already made. The pull increased. My surroundings dissolved. The splendor of Jesus, the visions, the weight of eternity, all disappeared in an instant as I was pulled back. And then, the pain. A violent gasp tore through my lungs. My body convulsed. Air flooded my throat. I was alive. The blinding lights of the hospital burned my retinas as I struggled to focus. Everything seemed too intense. The sound of machines beeping, the frantic voices of doctors, the weight of my body against the hospital bed. Something was wrong. Moments ago I was before Jesus. I had seen eternity, and now I was here. The face of a doctor hovered over me, eyes wide with disbelief. He's back. He's back. A nurse dropped a clipboard, stepping back as if she had seen a ghost. My chest heaved. The pain still burned. The throbbing in my head was unbearable, but none of it compared to the weight crushing my soul. I turned my head slowly. My eyes landed on my arm. The tattoos were just ink. Now I saw them differently. Some were harmless. Others carried something I'd never noticed. The truth hit me like a blow to the waist. The truth. Chest. I had made choices without understanding, opened doors without knowing what I was letting in, made declarations without thinking about what they meant. I wasn't the only one. The whole world was doing the same. The nurse was talking to me, asking if I could hear her, if I knew my name. But my mind was far away, my gaze fixed on the marks on my skin. My past now weighed differently. Unknowingly, I had given permission to something, allowed something to claim me. Tears burned my eyes, not just for what I had seen, but for what I knew now. How many people were walking through life, chained to something invisible? How many carried marks that linked them to forces they didn't even believe in? I clenched my fists. I needed to tell, needed to warn them, but who would believe me? Even before trying, I already knew the answer. I myself wouldn't have believed. But now it wasn't about belief, it was about truth. And if I didn't speak, who would? What a profound and transformative testimony. The Bible reminds us in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16-17. He also forced everyone, small, great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a certain mark on their right hand or forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless they had the mark. What we carry on our body and in our soul can have a much greater meaning than we imagine. This experience opened the eyes of our interviewee to a reality that few see. And now this truth is before you. Thank you very much for sharing this impactful story with us. And to you who watched until who watched. Here, may God's blessings guide your path and illuminate your choices. See you in the next video.